In 1972, a brand new airline took its first flight. It had no domestic routes, no home market to fall back on, no government subsidies propping up a failing balance sheet. It operated from a city-state the size of a small suburb. A country so small it doesn't even appear at standard zoom on most world maps. And yet, 50 years later, that airline is sitting on $17 billion in cash, has never once reported a full-year operating loss during peacetime, and has been voted the world's best airline so many times, the award almost feels like it was named after them. That airline is Singapore Airlines. And here's what makes no sense. Every Western carrier that has tried to replicate their model has failed, not struggled, not underperformed. Failed. So what exactly is Singapore Airlines doing, and why can nobody copy it? To understand the answer, you need to understand the trap that most airlines fall into. Commercial aviation is, by almost every financial metric, a brutal industry. Since the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk, the airline sector as a whole has destroyed more capital than it has created. Warren Buffett famously quipped that investors would have been better off if someone had shot down Orville Wright before he ever left the ground. The reasons are structural. Fuel is volatile. Labor is unionized and expensive. Aircraft are ruinously costly. Margins are razor thin. And in most countries, legacy carriers are saddled with something else: politics. Government-owned or politically connected airlines carry obligations that have nothing to do with profit. They prop up unprofitable domestic routes for regional connectivity. They hire beyond necessity because unemployment is bad optics. They protect national unions. They answer to parliaments, not shareholders. Singapore Airlines doesn't have any of that. Think about this for a moment. Singapore has no domestic routes. Not a single one. Every flight Singapore Airlines operates is, by definition, international, which means every single seat is competing at the premium end of the global market. That's not a coincidence. That's the foundation of the entire strategy. When Singapore split from Malaysia in 1965, the country had almost nothing. No natural resources, no agricultural land, no industrial base. What it had was geography, positioned at the crossroads of east-west trade routes, and a founding government with an unusually long time horizon. Lee Kuan Yew's administration understood early that Singapore's survival depended on being the best at whatever it chose to do. Mediocrity wasn't a viable strategy for a city that needed the world to want to pass through it. Singapore Airlines was built on that exact logic. If the airline couldn't be the cheapest, it would be the best. And to be the best, it would need to outspend, out-train, and out-execute everyone else, permanently. What followed was the construction of one of the most disciplined capital allocation machines in aviation history. Here's where most analysis of Singapore Airlines stops. People look at the premium service, the famous Singapore girl, the seats that lie fully flat, and conclude, great brand, great product. But that explanation misses the actual mechanism. Singapore Airlines runs one of the youngest aircraft fleets in the world, consistently averaging under 7 years per plane. That is not normal. Most carriers sweat their aircraft for 15, 20, sometimes 25 years to maximize the return on that original capital expenditure. Singapore Airlines retires aircraft early on purpose. Why? Because newer planes burn less fuel. Newer planes require less maintenance. Newer planes attract the premium passenger who pays a price point where the margin actually exists. And critically, newer planes signal to the market that this airline is not cutting corners. The capital required to maintain that fleet cycle is staggering, which brings us back to that $17 billion. That cash reserve isn't surplus profit sitting idle. It's the war chest that funds the fleet strategy. It's what allowed Singapore Airlines to weather COVID, the near-total destruction of international aviation, without a single aircraft sale, without mass redundancies, and without the emergency government bailouts that hollowed out every major Western carrier. Consider what happened between 2020 and 2022. United Airlines took on over $10 billion in new debt. American Airlines' debt load ballooned past $30 billion. Lufthansa required a €9 billion state rescue package. Air France-KLM needed its own government intervention. Singapore Airlines raised capital through a rights issue from its own shareholders and survived intact. When travel returned, Singapore Airlines was positioned to expand while competitors were still servicing emergency debt. They added routes, upgraded cabins, and captured the premium rebound market precisely because they hadn't been forced to cannibalize the product to stay alive. And here's the structural irony that no Western carrier can easily escape. The same government protection and union commitments that prop up legacy carriers in good times become the millstones that drag them under when the cycle turns. Singapore Airlines has no millstones. It was never built with them. This matters beyond one airline's balance sheet. Singapore's model has effectively set the benchmark against which every long-haul premium carrier is now measured. Passengers who fly Singapore Airlines in business class and then return to a legacy carrier's equivalent product aren't just disappointed. They become advocates for the gap. That reputational asymmetry is compounding. Every year that the quality difference persists, the premium passenger segments realign. And premium passengers, who represent a small fraction of seats but a massive fraction of revenue, follow the product. The question isn't whether Western carriers know this. They do. The question is whether their cost structures, their union agreements, their debt burdens, and their political constraints will ever allow them to close the gap. Singapore Airlines built a machine that cannot easily be copied because it wasn't built in response to competition. It was built in response to existential necessity, the genuine possibility that without excellence, Singapore itself had no future as a hub. That urgency produced discipline. That discipline produced the cash. That cash produced the fleet. And that fleet produces the product that keeps pulling premium passengers back. Most airlines are trying to survive the cycle. Singapore Airlines is trying to own it. The $17 billion isn't the secret. It's the proof. Here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Is there any Western airline that could pull off this model today, even if the politics disappeared overnight? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every one of them. If you found this useful, subscribe. There's a deep dive on why Emirates' model is simultaneously Singapore's closest rival and its mirror opposite coming very soon. You won't want to miss that one.